Most of what gets shared is prepping advice in this space. The lists, the bulk buy guides, the 13 items you're ignoring, contains at least 2 or 3 ideas that will quietly get you hurt if you actually use them. Today we're going to name them specifically. This video exists because there is a real difference between preparedness that looks right and preparedness that actually works. We've gone through some of the most widely circulated advice in this space and tested it against basic chemistry, medical practice, and real storage conditions. Several popular recommendations fail those tests, not slightly, but badly enough to cause harm. By the end of this video, you'll know which specific methods are dangerous, what to use instead, and how your storage environment is probably cutting your food shelf life in half without you realizing it. 3 free PDF downloads are in the description: the Mythbuster Field Guide, the Storage System Guide, and the Priority Wall Card. No email, no sign-up. Grab them now so you have them after the video. The prepping space loves lists. 13 items, 20 must-haves, the ultimate bulk buy guide. And there's nothing wrong with a list as a starting point. The problem is when a list gets treated as a system. A list implies completion. Buy these things, you're done. But real preparedness is a set of conditions: the right temperature in your storage area, the right containers sealed the right way, the right nutritional profile in your long-term diet, and accurate information about what each item in your stockpile actually does. Some items that appear on popular lists are genuinely solid: ferrocerium rods, cast iron cookware, food-grade diatomaceous earth for pest control, bar soap, canning lids if you're a serious home canner. We're not here to argue against the basics, but several recommendations that circulate widely contain assumptions that don't hold up, and some of them are medically dangerous. Let's go through them. There's one specific storage variable that most preppers never actually measure, and it's the single factor with the most leverage over whether your long-term food supply lasts 5 years or 25. We'll cover it at the 8-minute mark. If you have grain in storage right now, that section is worth waiting for. Baking soda is a legitimate item to stock. It has real uses: antacid, fire suppression on grease fires, cleaning abrasive, deodorizing, barter value. All of that holds up. What does not hold up is the claim that half a teaspoon per gallon neutralizes chlorine, heavy metals, and acidic contaminants. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. At kitchen concentrations, it raises pH slightly. That's the mechanism. It does not kill bacteria. It does not kill viruses. It does not remove pathogens in any meaningful way. Using it as your primary water treatment in an emergency is a way to drink contaminated water while feeling like you've done something about it. The East Palestine situation gets cited as a real-world example. The families who used baking soda on their skin were doing it because they were frightened, and it was what they had, not because it was medically recommended by anyone with authority on the subject. Anecdote is not protocol. Actual water treatment. Boiling. 1 full rolling minute kills everything biological. Iodine tablets. 2 tablets per quart. 30 minutes contact time. A quality hollow fiber or ceramic filter rated for bacteria and protozoa. These are cheap, proven, and available. Baking soda has a place in your stockpile. It is not a water treatment. This one is more dangerous because it sounds scientific. High concentration, pure, medical grade. That all sounds like it would be better for a wound than drugstore 70%. It's worse. Isopropyl alcohol at high concentration damages fibroblasts, the cells your body uses to close and rebuild damaged tissue. This is not a fringe position. Wound care medicine moved away from alcohol on wounds decades ago because the research is clear. It delays healing, increases scarring, and doesn't offer the infection protection people assume it does. Isopropyl alcohol belongs in your kit. It's excellent for sterilizing surfaces, instruments, and gear before use. As a fuel in alcohol stoves, it's legitimate. For cleaning electronics, it's the right tool. But pouring it into an open wound is doing harm in the name of help. For wound care, irrigate with clean water under pressure. A large syringe works. Even a Ziploc bag with a small hole works. Physical irrigation removes contamination. Then use diluted povidone iodine solution as an antiseptic if you have it. Cover with sterile gauze. That protocol comes from field medicine. The alcohol on wounds protocol comes from movies. Dental floss has real survival applications. Its strong cordage, 30-plus pound tensile strength per strand, waterproof, lightweight, good for lashing, snares, gear repair, and a dozen other field applications. Stock it. Use it for those things. Do not put it in a wound. Dental floss is not sterile. The wax coating is a contamination vector in tissue. Introducing non-sterile fiber into a deep laceration doesn't close the wound. It gives bacteria a substrate to grow on while your body's immune response is already compromised by stress, poor diet, and whatever situation you're in. Experienced field medics consistently say that a wound that's clean, packed with sterile gauze, and bandaged will almost always do better than an amateur suture with non-sterile thread. If you want suture capability in your kit, a pre-packaged sterile suture kit costs $8 to $12. It comes with actual suture thread, a proper needle, and it's sealed, paired with a basic wound closure tutorial watched before you need it. That's real capability. Dental floss in a laceration is an infection waiting to happen. The foil Faraday cage is one of the most widely shared prep ideas on the internet. It's also one of the most straightforwardly wrong. 2 minutes, and we'll show you what actually works, and it costs about the same as a roll of restaurant foil. Wrapping your electronics in 2 or 3 layers of aluminum foil does not create a functional Faraday cage. A real Faraday cage requires continuous conductive shielding with no gaps, adequate material thickness, and proper geometry. Kitchen foil has folds, wrinkle gaps, and insufficient thickness for any serious pulse event. It is not rated for this. It has not been tested for this. The physics don't support it. If EMP protection is a genuine priority in your planning, and that's a legitimate concern worth thinking through, the field expedient solution that actually provides meaningful shielding is a steel trash can with a tight-fitting lid. Line the inside with cardboard so your electronics don't touch the metal. Seal the lid gap with aluminum tape. That configuration provides documented basic shielding at a cost of about $30. Purpose-built EMP bags rated to actual standards exist and run $15 to $25 each for smaller items. Restaurant-grade foil is a genuinely useful item to stock. Solar cooking applications, rainwater collection, thermal reflection, signaling, all real. Just not as a Faraday cage. Here's the number most preppers have never actually checked. The temperature inside their storage area, measured across all 4 seasons. Hard red winter wheat in properly sealed Mylar with adequate oxygen absorbers can last 25 to 30 years. That figure is real. The conditions required to reach it are specific. Below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, low humidity, no temperature swings, heat-sealed Mylar, not just closed, actually sealed, with oxygen absorbers rated for the container volume. At 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, that 25-year wheat becomes 8 to 12 years. In a garage in Texas or Arizona that hits 90 degrees in summer, you might be looking at 3 to 5 years before rancidity becomes a real problem. The shelf life calculation isn't primarily about the grain or the container. It's about the environment those containers live in. The step most people skip in sealing is the heat seal. A Mylar bag with a closed lid over it is not a Mylar bag with a sealed Mylar bag. The seal is what creates the oxygen-free environment. Use a flat iron set to wool or a dedicated impulse sealer. Check that your oxygen absorbers are rated for your container size. A 300 cubic centimeter absorber in a 5-gallon bucket is undersized by a factor of 5 or more. The storage system guide in the description has the full container-by-container breakdown. One more point on diatomaceous earth. Food-grade DE is a legitimate pest deterrent. It desiccates insects by contact, effective and non-toxic. But it does not remove oxygen from a container. Oxidation of fats and grain continues regardless of whether DE is present. Use both. DE for pest pressure, oxygen absorbers for long-term oxidation prevention. They solve different problems and don't substitute for each other. The biggest nutritional hole in most stored food diets isn't protein or calories. It's a specific set of micronutrients that your body starts depleting quietly after 60 to 90 days on grains and legumes alone. By the time symptoms show up, some damage is already done. We'll cover what's missing and exactly how to fix it. It costs less than $15 a year per person. Rice, beans, wheat, and pasta give you macronutrients. They don't give you iodine. They don't give you meaningful vitamin C. They don't give you B12 in a form your body can absorb if your gut is compromised by stress and a changed diet. And they don't give you vitamin D, which affects immune function, mood, and calcium absorption in ways that compound over months. These aren't minor gaps. They're the deficiencies that start causing real medical problems at the 60 to 90-day mark of a sustained disruption. Iodine is the most overlooked. Not a single grain or legume in a standard prepping stockpile contains meaningful iodine. Your thyroid needs it for basic metabolic function. One sheet of dried nori delivers a full daily dose. Dried kelp powder added to soups and stews does the same. A large bag costs under $20 and stores indefinitely in a sealed glass jar away from light. Vitamin C from sodium ascorbate powder, not ascorbic acid, which is hard on an empty stomach, dissolves in water, absorbs quickly, and prevents the deficiency that leads to slow wound healing, bleeding gums, and eventually scurvy. Scurvy is not a historical curiosity. It has shown up in modern food-insecure populations subsisting on shelf-stable carbohydrates. A 1-pound bag of sodium ascorbate is over 400 servings at about 5 cents each. Methylcobalamin B12 in sublingual form, absorbed under the tongue, bypassing a digestive system that may not be functioning optimally under stress. Neurological damage from B12 deficiency develops slowly and is often misread as fatigue or mood issues until it's advanced. The Mythbuster Field Guide in the description has the complete nutritional gap table with practical sources and doses for each one. Download it. Here's what we want you to leave with. The difference between useful preparedness and the appearance of preparedness is accurate information stored properly, applied correctly. A stockpile built on bad assumptions is not a safety net, it's a false one. 3 things to do in the next 48 hours. Measure the actual temperature in your storage area, not what you think it is, what it actually is. Check whether anything in Tier 3 storage is sealed or just closed, and download the priority wall card from the description. Print it, put it on the wall where you make decisions. All 3 PDF guides are in the description. No email, no sign-up. Free because the information is what matters. We'll see you in the next one.